All right.
Join us for a special episode of The Level in honor of Latin Heritage Month. Acompáñenos a un episodio especial de The Level en honor al mes de la herencia latina.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Mintoy Sangur from VMLY&R Miami. I am a strategist and chair for the Nosotros ERG. Welcome to The Level, a vodcast series brought to you by VMLY&R. This is a vodcast that creates a space where we highlight our POC colleagues and underrepresented groups within the agency. The intention is for us to talk about the real topics, real issues, and real action steps that we can take to improve the workplace and the work that we do. We want to amplify and level up our colleagues, our communities, and give actionable steps towards allyship. So we're going to introduce everybody. Welcome to the Level Vodcast. We will be discussing Latin and Hispanic identity from an intersectional point of view in conjunction with members of our other sister ERGs. So I'm going to pass on the mic to our colleagues. Why don't you start, Nat?
Thank you. I'm Nat Carey. I'm the managing director under client engagement out of the Miami office. Originally from New York, I am a proud first-generation American by way of two amazing Dominican parents, and I toggle between Black culture and Latina culture. So I'm excited to bring the real talk to Ming's point earlier and have a conversation with this amazing group.
Hello everyone. I am Tasha Cottrell. I am Associate Connections Director, Paid Media out of the Kansas City office. And I am a crazy, wild, spirited mix between Dominican from my great-grandfather, Santo Domingo, all the way to Louisiana. And my mom's side of the family, we are proud Cherokee Nation members. So excited to get into it. Let's go.
Hey, my name is Karin Matarazzo. I'm also part of the Miami office and I work in the strategy team. I am originally from Mexico City and I have Jewish parents, but these Jewish parents come from one from Poland, one from Istanbul in Turkey, so I'm very colorful.
Hi, I'm Nicole Payne. I work as an omni-channel media manager, and I work for VMLY&R Commerce. I'm based in Southern California, but I report into our Cleveland office, and I am half Mexican and half Japanese.
Hello, I'm Renee LaVecchia. I'm the Executive Director of Client Engagement out of our Miami office. I was born and raised in Panama, so I consider myself to be 100% Panamanian, but I'm also 100% American because I was born in the Canal Zone, which is a former American territory in Panama. But to add to those layers, I'm also genealogically 50% Chinese and 50% Italian per Ancestry.com. But the Chinese part, I think, is an important part in my upbringing because I grew up very much as an American Panamanian Chinese in Panama, which, fun fact, Panama has the largest Chinese population in Central America.
So let's talk a little bit about those two cultures embodying in one individual. How do both your cultures compare and contrast? Let's start with you, Renee.
So I think, the two cultures that really stand out for me that make me up is the Panamanian American. And my Panamanian self really comes up in my mom's self in terms of how I raise my daughter, because Spanish is really important, that we speak that at home. Whether it is the food that we make, it is the cultures and the customs that we keep. But my American self is my professional self. It's the way I come to work every day. So that's a bit how those two cultures live as part of who I am.
When Renee was talking, I was thinking if I'm like so capable to separate it like 50% and 50%. I think I'm not, because, for example, I can have for lunch falafel with salsa, and I don't know if it's 50% Israeli Jewish and 50% Mexican or not. But I see it more like as not contrasting, more like a complementary self. For example, in the house we speak Spanish, English, and Hebrew at the same time. So this is not 50% or 50%. It's more something that is part of the identity. It's more that make me like add colors to myself, like add dimensions to myself.
It's kind of like, I want to say it's innate, and it's been like that with my family, that just the way we are as a family, we've always operated as a close-knit tribe and community. Even on the Dominican side, we have Taino, which is our indigenous, and then I have my Cherokee. So we operate as a tribe, and just our beliefs, our values, our systems, our ways, it's always been tribal. It's the spirituality that has always been there. Even as a kid, you couldn't put a finger on it, but you always felt it and you knew it. So it's just how we grew up in our household. So it's always been one for me. It's just cool figuring out what it is and actually putting a finger on it and identifying it, but it's always been there for me.
I think for me, being fourth generation Mexican American, fourth generation Japanese American, I probably identify more as American because all my family has grown up here. On my Japanese side, the language does not exist. On my Mexican side, it's a very Spanglish conversation, mostly dominated by English. So I think I might differ a little bit in that because we are more engrossed in the American culture. So I've kind of embraced it all, but at the same time, probably feel a little bit more American.
Yeah, I think, I was prepared for this answer, right, or this question. And then in hearing everyone, I think it's shifting a bit because I'm kind of thinking of my marriage right now, right? So I'm married to a Bahamian man who was born and raised in the Bahamas. And obviously we have amazing blended Caribbean children. And I thought I was pretty Americanized, I would say, until I guess we got together and now are raising children, because now my Dominican is on like full blast. And I think to Renee's point, like, what are the things we hang on to in our culture that we want to ensure gets passed down? I don't have the benefit much of Spanish. Spanish is, my second language. And because I'm Dominican, it sounds like my fifth language. But it's something that I do try to bring into the household. The meals that I cook, the way that we raise our children, Renee made a great point in that. I find a lot of my mom coming into the rules that exist there. I think professionally, I show up similarly, American first in many ways, but I think that everything comes through the lens of a Dominican insight. And as it relates to, Black culture, the best term that's happened to me as of late has been the term Afro-Latina, right? So I no longer have to split the two. It's like I am that at all times. So that's been something to date that I've really kind of clung on to, just because that didn't really exist in my upbringing. I think back in the day, when you said Black, it instantly pushed you into African American. So always having to unpack that and say, I'm not African American, I'm Dominican American, but I am Black, because race and ethnicity are two different things, people. So that's something that I've always had to walk the line on. But, when I walk down the street, I'm a Black woman first. And then as people get to know me, they realize I'm Dominican. But I try to live in that full spirit of 100% of everything, at all times.
But you are welcome to answer this in any way you want. How do you define your identity? And how does America define your identity?
Yeah, I think, like I said, the term Afro-Latina really helps me. So that's how I define myself when I speak to people. I'm Dominican American, I'm Afro-Latina. The way America wants me to define myself is to pick one. I don't think they really figured out that you can be Black in many things. You could be white in many things, right? I think they want you to pick and choose. And that comes to life at as they say, the family barbecues too, right? There's a lot of off-color comments that happen in my Dominican household, the same way that there's off-color comments that happen on my husband's side of the family, speaking to what the stereotypes of the Latinx culture is versus what Black culture or African American culture is. And I have to stand up for all sides of it, right? Because I'm like, nope, like you're offending me, all parts of me, all the time. So I think it's this constant push or struggle for me to either forgive them because I am them, but then also to understand them because I am them. So I think it's always this situation of having to choose between the two versus them as a whole, as America, understanding that we are one and the same in many ways.
I feel like when I was younger, I definitely wasn't, what's the word? I wanted to avoid awkward conversations. So I would come out and tell people all the time. I'm half Japanese and half Mexican, in fear of people saying something about one or the other. I think now that I'm older and I'm a little bit more confident in myself, I don't feel the need to wear that as quickly, because I feel like now I'm in a place in my life where I'm comfortable to tell people that's not okay. But definitely growing up, that was definitely something I wore on my sleeve and I was quick to tell people.
I mean, going back to even what Nat was saying, it's frustrating having to pick a circle and fill it in when it doesn't exist. And you want to pick all the circles, but then you're like, it's like Hispanic, but not, but I am, but then it's okay, Dominican, we're Hispanic, and we're African, we're Taino, and then Native American, where does that even fit in? Native American, but not. So it's not inclusive. It's not all inclusive. You're forced to be one. And going back to even just growing up, it didn't make any sense to try to explain it. Because just like Nat said, we present Black, right? First and foremost. That's no matter I can sit here and tell you that my great-great-great-grandfather was on the Dawes Roll and he was full-blooded Cherokee. It doesn't matter, because now you don't look like not even going to get into this, but you don't look like what was presented as Cherokee, and your hair's curly, your hair's straight, your skin's this, you're not, it's so many, it always made me be on the defense. Always trying to prove. So again, going back to what Nicole's saying, I'm over proving anything. I know what I am. I want to make sure my children know what they are, and there's no struggle, there's no fight anymore. It is what it is, and I'm proud of it.
And originally, I used to define myself as mixed Jewish or Jewexican. Since I came here and I learned that I'm also Hispanic, because I didn't think that I was Hispanic before. Like, I am Jewish and Mexican, I am Mexican and Jewish. But there is a common saying in Hebrew that I say, Meshane makom, meshane mazal. What means, cambio de lugar, cambio de suerte. Change place, change luck. And I will add to that layer, change place, change luck, but in summary, change perspective. So I don't know if my identity is Jewexican Hispanic and I look white. It's more like I'm open and I am multicultural, and in summary, I am Karim.
Yeah, I think I'm going to bring forth a lot of the same themes that the other panelists have raised. I'm going to go back to my upbringing. So in Panama, I grew up in a very multicultural, diverse country. And it was like that historically, if you go back, because there were a lot of immigrants that went to Panama to help build the first transcontinental railroad, to help build the Panama Canal. And I can recall that my world was an amalgamation of different people and different backgrounds. And I thought about this, and it's really like a woven fabric. A lot of times people talk about multiculturalism as a mosaic, but I grew up in a place where you didn't really talk about race or ethnicity. And I know it may sound like it's naive, but I just don't think it was, kind of in our vernacular to do that, because we grew up in such a diverse environment. So when you come to the United States, to go back to your question, Ming, you are asked to tick a box. And I really hate that tick that box. It's hard to even say you got to tick a box for all the reasons that you guys have stated, because we are so multicultural on this panel. But it also is because it's actually trying to put you in a box. And I don't, for me, I identify as I'm Panamanian American, and guess what? I'm part Chinese and I'm part Italian, and I don't fit in a box. And to Karin's point, I am who I am. So it's, the context of it is really where if you come from a place where the box doesn't exist, it's hard to be in a place where they're asking you to tick a box.
I'm going to read a definition of a term, and I want you guys to tell me, simple yes or no, and if you have a story, share it, if this has happened to you. We're going to talk about covering. Covering is a strategy through which individuals manage or downplay their differences. Covering can prevent an individual from bringing their authentic selves to work and hinder an organization from creating a true culture of inclusion. Have you guys ever found yourself covering in your job?
Before I joined VMLY&R, all parts of me, whether it was Dominican, Black, Native American, woman, and I've been in the game for a long time. I'm an OG, okay? I've been in this game for a long time. I literally had to leave parts of me in the car. Like, I used to call myself Mrs. Potato Head. I will leave those parts of me in the car so I can enter the building. And then when I would leave the building, I would put myself back together again. Because not only was I the only any of those things, I was the only woman, I was the only one at the level that I was at as manager, on the manager role. So white men, suits and ties, and it was Tasha. So in my professional career, I've always been conditioned to leave those parts of me. And then every now and then, let's be honest, just like Nat saying, every now and then it would come out because I was conditioned to do what I had to do and present, which learning how to present is what was professional. And what I hate to say, sometimes showing up professional for me was the American. So that was just something that I mastered, right? But sometimes there were situations where it would come out and then they're like, well, who is this? Who the hell is this? And I'm like, always been there, but let me tuck her back in. So I'm happy to be at a place where I can be myself. But I had to deal with that for a very, very, very long time. And it wasn't even just my ways or my personality or my attitude or, all the stereotypes that they want to put on us. You're speaking strong, you're loud, or you're energetic, or you have an emotion, or you're angry, or whatever, because you get that on both the Hispanic side and the Black side. But then it was how I look. I remember going for this management position to go interview, and I purposely straightened my hair. And I had my hair, I'm naturally curly. I purposely straightened my hair for the interview. One day when I decided to wear my hair curly, it was like, yo, what is that? So, I'm blessed to be in the position and the situation I am now at VMLY&R, and that was one of the reasons why I joined, because I could be myself. I didn't have to be Mrs. Potato Head anymore.
I would say no. I feel like I can be my authentic self at work. I feel like when I was in school and in college, maybe I wasn't always my most authentic self, but definitely now that I have found advertising, I think as a general rule, I've been very fortunate to work in some very diverse settings. And so I feel like I could be my authentic self.
I think that even if I try, I will never be able to hide my Mexican accent. So if I try to cover it up, will not be possible. So I say no.
Do you feel America understands what it means to be multicultural?
The answer is no. Oh, so go ahead, Nicole.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say kind of yes, kind of no. I feel like I live in Southern California, and I'm blessed to live in a very diverse neighborhood. And I like the other panelists, am a mom, and I see the kids that my kids are going to school with, and it's very mixed. It's a little bit of everything, and I'm so proud of that and happy that they get that. But at the same time, growing up, people couldn't wrap their head around the fact that I was Japanese and Mexican. And one little tidbit that I always remember that always at the time made me laugh and now makes me mad. I was sitting in class one time and it came up that I was half Japanese and half Mexican. And one of my classmates asked, well, how do your parents communicate? And I was like, well, they talk to each other. And he was like, no, like what language? And I was like, English. And he was like, oh, they both speak English? And I was like, well, they were both born here, and so were my grandparents. Like, why would you assume that they don't speak English? And he was just kind of like, oh, ha, ha, ha. And I remember being like, huh, that is funny. And then afterwards being annoyed and hurt, like, why would you assume that?
Well, when I hear Nicole's story, I kind of have to say, well, some people know, right? Just because of the experience that you had where they didn't really understand, like, how are people communicating? I think yes and no. I probably am in the same camp as Nicole. I mean, to say by and large that America doesn't understand what it means to be multicultural, I think is probably not altogether true. I mean, people talk about America as being the melting pot, right? And it is kind of, if you go back historically, I mean, it is there was immigration and that has made America what it is today. So I think there are those who do know what it means to be multicultural. You know, I mean, I live here in Miami, and I think that is true here. I think it's true maybe in New York and New York City, that is so international and has so many people from all over, and that could speak to whether that's like true or not. So I do think, you know, maybe California, maybe Texas, you know, even in Minnesota, my husband is Swedish, and there were a lot of immigrants to Minnesota from Sweden. And when I went to Minnesota, I was surprised by how much Swedishness was there. So I do think that there are people who really do, but I think like anything else, I think there's also those who don't really understand what it's like to be multicultural, who maybe are not connected to those roots and to their heritage in the same way, and may live in communities that are not that multicultural.
Nat, you gave a really strong no. I want to hear.
Yes, I gave a strong no because I've been thinking about this. And I think that, yes, America today understands what it is to have a blended family, mixed race children. And I think they understand that an individual can be of many or multicultures, right? But I don't think that America understands what it means to be the actual melting pot that they project to the world and to be multicultural, right? I think people still have pause when they see mixed race couples. People still have at the dinner table conversations about the types of people you should be bringing home. People still believe that being one race or ethnicity is less desirable than the next. I do feel that when we talk about cultures and pop culture, right, I think people still put it into buckets of this is Black culture, this is Latinx culture, this is American culture, right? We saw it on the runway not too long ago at the Met Gala. People still define American culture in many different ways. And if it was truly multicultural, then I think you would have one note in some ways. And I hope that's making sense. So I still strongly feel that we don't, as a country, understand what multicultural is because we have yet to swim in the different waters with each other just yet, right? I think we still are, and individually or as a society, like we're still holding on to our cultures. We're not really sharing it out. We're still calling people vulture cultures or culture vultures and those types of things. But if we were truly multicultural, and this might be a crazy thing for me to say out loud, we would embrace those things and give credit where credit is due, of course, but we would embrace that people are, you know, blending and being inspired by different things and those things of the like. And, you know, I think we're getting there. And I love that people are talking about their children and where, like, I love seeing my kids coming off the school bus and their friends, and they don't see things in that way. But I still know that once my kids go from elementary school to high school, then to, you know, college or university, or, you know, if they want to be an entrepreneur, that's okay too. But let me just say it out loud. But, you know, I think there's still going to be those pivotal moments where I have to have a conversation around what they are and how the world perceives them. And if I still have to have those conversations, then I have to be strong in my opinion that we just don't know what it is to be multicultural yet. But I'm hopeful.
I have mixed feelings because I believe America knows that we are getting more and more multicultural. 41% of the American population, according to the last census, is multicultural. But when trying people to check a box, we are like leaving apart all the potential that the multiculturalists can bring to the table. Like if I try to put you in a box, if I try to put you a label, maybe I lose the other part, the good part of being multicultural. So we are starting to know 41% of the population is multicultural, but I think we have better ways to take advantage of this multiculturalism.
I don't know if you guys saw me when Nat was speaking, I looked like I was headbanging because I was nodding my head so hard because I agree with her, and I'm a no too. For me, there's a couple things going on with this question. I feel like America is hypocritical when it comes to that. When you have that, we're such a melting pot. It's the lure, it's the sexiness of America, that we're just this beautiful melting pot of all these different cultures. Come here. Nah. I feel that it knows we're multicultural. It knows that we have, these huge populations of different cultures, like you said, in Miami and New York and Seattle and in California, but we're not represented. We don't have that voice. It's still the main audience, which are the whites. And for me, I feel like just now, like that whole controversy over was it the Cheerio commercial with the mixed couple? They're just now accepting black and white. Black and white is normal now. White mom, black dad, that's normal now. Still a little, but normal. So to even get to all the other mixes, they're not there yet, and they're not ready for that, and we're not represented. And that's just the honest truth. Until we are represented on a bigger scale, what truly is America, what's the point of knowing about it if you don't see it and we're not represented?
Now that we're talking about this, what do you guys feel about the term general market? Renee.
Oh yeah, I gotta jump in on that. Well, I'm going to say that it is definitely an evolving term. I don't even know. I started to think about this word when we talked about it the other day. I don't even know if it's used outside of marketing and advertising, because it's used so much in the space that we're in our jobs. And, in the broadest sense of the word, right? General market means the mass market. But if you look at it through the ethnic lens, the general market today versus what it was before is different. And that's why I say it's evolving. So the general market, I think, and the mass market used to be predominantly, at some point in time, white Caucasian. But today, when you talk about the general market, for real, if you really look at the makeup, and Karin, you were talking about the makeup of the population in the United States, the general market has become much more multicultural. So I think, when I think about that word, I think for marketers, it means non-multicultural, but the reality is that the general market is much more multicultural today than ever.
I wanted to add to Renee because I was thinking like something similar. So, ¿qué pasaría si te digo that in 10 more years, the general market will be multicultural? Mm-hmm. So, we'll be making up, let's say, 50% of the population.
Yeah. Actually, as an interjection, if I may add, Gen Z is officially minority white.
So
Gen Z is 44% non-Hispanic white. So add to that.
I believe the general market works for beautiful decks, but I don't know if it will be useful for so much time.
I do, Ming. I think that though, even if we have these numbers, because we brought this up before, that we wanted to have numbers to kind of back this argument up, but even if we have those percentages, going back to it being just about, marketing, how are we getting our clients to look at what the general market is now with the percentages that are multicultural? Because in their minds, and this goes back to, I wanted to kind of say this before, their minds, it's still majority white. So I feel like the generations that we're in, the generations before us, these things still have to die out before our babies and the Gen Zers can come and it starts presenting differently. Because even though we have those numbers, the mindset is still there. And I think as us being in professionals in the advertising world, it's our responsibility to show up and to discuss things with our client and to show, okay, this is what it looks like now. And I know you're used to speaking to these people, but this is what it is, because the mindset's still there despite the numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So true. I think I have two thoughts on this. So the first is, I agree with what everyone is saying, right? Because it's like, what is general market anymore? But I also think that we have to be aware of how we're perceived too, right? Nothing is more telling than when you see a tourism ad and what the Americans look like in the tourism ad. They don't look like me, right? And so that's still representing what they believe the general market is when it comes to what America is. So that's one of my points. And then the other point is, I think there's that layered effect that happens that maybe goes beyond just what we look like and how we represent, because you'll have a general market focused campaign and you can push for it to be more representative of America, but then it goes down to, and it gets sliced and diced, because thank you data, like I'm always gonna say, yes, thank you to the data, but we'll say this income bracket, these interests, right? And so then when you start slicing and dicing, and then we've all heard the terms, oh, but we want a more affluent target. This is the aspirational target, right? So then you're going through the lens of either general market or even multicultural, and then you have to look at affluence, you have to look at this aspirational, and it still ends up laddering up to white, right? And so I think that's also the difficult piece to communicate, of the type of person that you want to buy this product and the type of person you want to represent. And what has happened, in my opinion anyway, is when you look at the advertising and you look at the segments, people still see themselves in white people, right? You look at different races, you look at different ethnicities, and they could still relate to seeing a commercial if there's a white person in it, but they can't relate if they see a Black person in it, or an Asian person in it, or a Latina person in it, right? Now, I'm not even gonna talk about Indigenous, Tasha, because I don't see them in the ads, but that's the part that hurts. And I think that we end up in the situation of like, how do we not offend all cultures by representing one? Because you only have 60 seconds if you're lucky, but let's be honest, we're being pushed into the 15s. And if you're in social, hey, 6 seconds and then you got 3, right? So it's like, we're trying to just not offend the masses in a limited amount of time. So then you lean towards white, because everyone understands that if it is white and then that person is talking in English, then it is American.
I agree with a lot of what the other lady said. Kind of like Renee, I feel like it's evolving. What I do is I place the TV and radio buys for some of our clients. And what I see, and we do it specifically by market. So for me, in the Los Angeles market, 45% of the market identifies as Hispanic or Latino. How then is the 55% that's being made up of white, African American, American Native, and Asian? How do you call it? What specifically is general market? And so for me, that term, I feel like is becoming outdated, because in some of these local markets that we work in, like Miami, like New York, like San Francisco, the majority there's no majority. It's more even. And so I feel like the way we're spending our money, if we're talking general market tactics, it just seems silly when race isn't really, or ethnicity isn't, I think, a factor. I think we should be looking more at other aspects like interests and stuff like that.
As a Hispanic, and here I ask everybody to put your Hispanic eyes on, what does advertising get right and what does advertising get wrong when it comes to our representation? And a follow-up question to that is, if you then put on your other glasses, does that change?
So my maiden name is Taveras, not to be confused with the band Taveras. I learned that way back when. I get a lot less mail in Spanish now that my last name is Carey. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Okay.
I just feel that, and Nat, I feel you. I feel that somehow it's safe if you just think that Latin or Hispanic is everything Mexican. You forget that there's so many other, but I feel like that's what they think, and that's what's safe, and that's what they understand, and that's what they identify with. So you just paint, and I love my Mexican brothers and sisters, but you just paint all of America Mexican when there's so many others. I feel like that's the safe feeling. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but that's what I think. Mm-hmm.
Karin?
I want to follow with Tasha comment because I'm Mexican, but I don't look like Mexican. So I recognize and I identify all the Mexican signs here. But if somebody look at me at the street, they won't see me as a Mexican. So it's kind of the opposite side of the coin. Like, I am represented, yes, but people identify me as Hispanic. If they see me in the street, no. So kind of confusing in a way.
I think that advertisers, for a very long time, and still do today, feel that the way to connect with any audience, and we're talking about the Hispanic market, is not only from a casting perspective, but also from a language perspective. So therefore, now you've really narrowed, like, how are you going to connect with these audiences? And we know here that is much more than just a language and even a casting play to what Karin is mentioning, because, Hispanic, the Hispanic or Latino look is not one look. And so I think that advertisers who are really bold advertisers are those who recognize that the right way to be able to connect with these audiences is really it is about being contextually and culturally relevant to those audiences. And I think it's then when you see advertising, like I'll say that, my American self watches a lot of English language television and very little Spanish language television. And so when I see shows or ads in the programming that I'm watching, that I know as an advertiser, they have identified Hispanic or Latinx to be the audience, but they do it in a really nice way. I'm like, oh, that's really nice. You can kind of, maybe as an advertiser, you can kind of tell. And equally, you can tell brands who are just saying, hey, I'm just going to do casting to make sure that I'm ticking all the boxes here and I'm reaching. And those advertisers are the ones who haven't really quite figured out that it isn't just about a cast. It's not a casting play.
I would echo what Renee said. I definitely agree with that. I tend to probably also watch more American television, and one thing, especially for me, for what I do, is I try to make sure that my TV buys really have representation, and make sure that I'm buying programs that really represent America as what the census tells us, and not just what certain Hollywood executives tell us. So I think that that's always been something that, I'll go to the upfronts here locally every year, and that's where they bring out programs that are going to run on television. And I remember that being one of the things that hurt the most the first time I went to one, was watching all of these programs and not seeing the diversity that I grew up with, or the diversity that I saw in college. And so to me, that's always been something of importance, and I love seeing more and more shows. I think we still have a ways to go, but I love seeing the more diverse TV shows and movies and things like that. And really, I like it when I really love it that I have a couple of clients that really understand that and want to be in those programs.
Yeah, I realize I didn't answer the what they're doing right. I want to make sure that I say that out loud. I think leaning into content creation with Latinx influencers that are representative of our culture, I think that's something they're doing really well, right? They're giving the space to those who know how to represent us best, and they're giving them the stage. And I think that's the best thing that they can do, because I don't think there's any research right now that really understands the multi-layers that exist within our culture. And so that's one thing that they're doing 100% right, and kind of shining light on those within the space that are trying to put, their best foot forwards to represent us and, to put us on screen in that way. So keep doing that is what I would say.
Amazing. Tasha says, for everybody to hear this, the Spanish language call too. Dominicans speak differently from Mexicans and from Colombians and Panamanians and Argentinians and Brazilians. It's our cousin language. So definitely, absolutely, the accents are a way for us to identify. We can pick up where somebody is from really quickly by the accent. Quick takeaway. What would you like the audience that's watching this to leave with?
I want you guys to get that, please, the box thing is not okay. We are so big, we're huge, we're beautiful, we're all over the place, and let us be our authentic selves in all of it. Don't put us in pieces. Take the whole goddamn puzzle and love it, enjoy it. It's beautiful. That's my takeaway.
Okay.
We're doing this because it is Hispanic Heritage Month, or we're calling it Latino Heritage Month. And, if I go back to your question about does America understand what it means to be multicultural, I think what I would like, maybe it's not as a takeaway, but as more of an action, is for the listeners of this, because I think everybody must have a multicultural friend, family, or colleague, if not Hispanic or some other multicultural background. And I would just say, take this moment to talk to that person about how they feel being who they are, their multicultural self in America. And what does that mean for them? Just like you asked us questions and we talked about our families and what that means for us. I just think it's a real quick way to just get a glimpse into what it really means, because you probably don't see it. Your professional person, the Renee person that you're dealing with, I think you could learn a lot from just taking that moment, that one friend, and say, what is it like? In the sense of, what does it mean for you to be that person, that Dominican, that Panamanian, that Mexican, Japanese, and how does that reflect in your everyday life and with your family and even when you go to work? And I think there's a lot to be said, and I think there's a lot to be learned from that.
I want to make an invitation to start listening a little bit more, to start listening to stories, to start listening that friend, to start listening new music. Como que de esa manera vamos a poderle ver otros colores a las cosas que nos estamos perdiendo.
Maravilloso, me encanta, gracias.
I think my one takeaway would be that that representation matters. That in the commercials, in TV, in the movies, that it's important to have diverse audiences because that's what America really looks like.
I'm going to build on Nicole's point and say, don't just accept that representation matters, right? Don't just accept that you heard a song on the radio or someone's giving an award on stage or showing up in an ad, or as you're reviewing the work that you see a person of color in the storyboard. I think it's provide the opportunity. It goes beyond acceptance, like give the space, move over, make room, and allow for people like us to bring a diversity, not just of representation, but of thought into those conversations and into those spaces, because it's super important that we level set or, level up and ensure that we're represented, but more than anything else, given the opportunity to do so.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a wrap. I want you all to give yourself a round of applause. This was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.